Welcome to the session on the Wikipedia assignment. We are delighted you're here. I'm Todd Stanislav, and I'm the director of Ferris State University's Faculty Center for Teaching and Learning. I want to extend my thanks to our panelists, whom I will introduce momentarily, and to my colleagues in Ferris State's library, Stacy Anderson and Heather Simon Bassett. I also want to thank, for their support and assistance with this session, Wiki Education, which is an independent nonprofit institution that supports the use of Wikipedia and Wikimedia projects in higher education in the US and Canada. Our panelists today are Helene Blumenthal, who's Senior Program Manager at Wiki Education. Nanette Coleman is the founder and executive director of the Interdisciplinary Research Group on Privacy and the PhD candidate in sociology at UC Berkeley. And Ava Wu, a 2020 graduate of UC Berkeley with Bachelor of Arts degrees in French and molecular and cell biology. Ava was a student of Nanette's and also served as a research assistant and senior project lead in the Interdisciplinary Research Group on Privacy. And currently, Ava works at an international law firm. Joining us also as panelists is Trudy Jacobson, sorry, Trudy, who's Professor Emerita at the University of Albany, SUNY, and Mark Marinkovich, who's a junior at the University of Albany, double majoring in political science and philosophy with a minor in history. Mark was a student in one of Trudy's classes and is currently an intern in the New York State Assembly with plans to attend law school. So today's session is comprised of 4 parts. First, Helene will get us going with an overview of the Wikipedia Student Program, and then Nanette and Ava will share their experiences using Wikipedia assignments on privacy, cybersecurity, and surveillance. Trudy and Mark will then focus on the link between Wikipedia assignments and meta-literacy. And then finally, our goal is to have time at the end for Q&A. So with that, I'll hand this over to you, Helene.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
You can.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you so much to Todd for initiating this, this panel. And thank you so much to Nanette, Trudy, Ava, and Mark for so graciously agreeing to participate and to speak to everybody today. Again, I'm Helene Blumenthal, Senior Program Manager at Wiki Education, and I'm going to give you kind of the broad picture of what we're going to be speaking about today. So number one, who is Wiki Education? As Todd mentioned, we're a small nonprofit organization. We're actually independent of the Wikimedia Foundation, which is the big organization that runs Wikipedia. And our mission, broadly speaking, is to connect the worlds of academia and other knowledge-based institutions with that of Wikipedia and Wikidata. So in other words, we try to engage with subject matter experts to contribute to and to become part of sort of the Wikipedia and Wikidata communities. We do this chiefly through 2 different programs, the Wikipedia Student Program, which is what you'll hear about today, and our Wikipedia Scholars Program. The former is a simple but powerful concept. Instructors like those you'll hear from today at institutions of higher education in the US and in Canada have their students contribute to Wikipedia as an assignment in their courses. The latter program, the Wikipedia Scholars Program, is one where we actually run courses where we train subject matter experts on how to contribute to Wikipedia and Wikidata. I saw that there were a lot of librarians registered for this event, so I know many of you might actually be interested in learning more about Wikidata, and if so, please send me an email and I can put you in touch with the people who run that program. But as I said, today we're going to be talking about the Wikipedia Student Program. I'll probably just call it the Wikipedia assignment. Just again, pretty basic, the basic outlines of the project. Instructors essentially have their students contribute to Wikipedia as a graded assignment in their courses, either in addition to or in lieu of a traditional term paper. The program has been around since 2010, and I wanted to give you guys a sense of what the students we've worked with in that time period have done on Wikipedia, because I think the numbers are very impressive and kind of speak for themselves. We've worked with about 5,100 courses, and that amounts to over 100,000 students across 800 institutions in the US and in Canada. Those students have collectively added about 85 million words to Wikipedia. They've worked on over 100,000 articles, and their work has been viewed hundreds of millions of times. That is the equivalent of about 62 printed encyclopedia volumes. And we also know that about 20% of all new editors to Wikipedia are coming from this program. Simply put, when given the chance, students can have an immense and a really outsized impact on public and open knowledge. And so how do we make this all happen? What are some of the logistics? I'm not going to go too deeply into the mechanics of how to run the assignment, but I want to make sure that everybody understands the types of support that we offer as an organization. And I think maybe Trudy and Annette will go in a little bit more into some of the specifics. But we sort of have a three-pronged approach to supporting these Wikipedia-based assignments. And the first one is we developed a fairly robust series of training modules, exercises, and guides to shepherd instructors and students through this experience. Learning how to contribute to Wikipedia is not a trivial thing. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot to learn about the community and about the norms and the standards. And so we walk students and instructors through every part of the Wikipedia experience, from creating your username to making that final contribution, that live contribution. The second thing is our course dashboard. So you can think of this as as an LMS or a learning management system like Canvas or Blackboard, but specifically for the Wikipedia assignment. You can think of it as kind of the central hub for your Wikipedia assignment. It's where students can access all the different training modules. It's where you have a step-by-step, week-by-week guide to how to learn how to contribute to Wikipedia. And it's where you can a lot more easily see what your students are doing on Wikipedia, and so everybody can kind of see what everybody else is doing on Wikipedia. It's presented in a much more digestible form. And Nanette and Trudy might share some screenshots of this system with you guys. Lastly, staff. There's staff like myself and several other people at Wiki Education who are here to help you throughout the project. So if you are running into any problems or something's not clear, we're absolutely here to help. And last but not least, the program is fully funded and free of charge. So there are no fees to participate, to run a Wikipedia assignment. Our other program, the Wikipedia Scholars Program, is fee-based, but this is not. So just know that there are no fees to run this program. So before I turn this over to Nanette, I just wanted to quickly touch upon the question of why. Why do this project? Why adopt a project with which you are unfamiliar, with which most of your students are unfamiliar? I mean, everybody's familiar with Wikipedia. Very few people are familiar with actually editing Wikipedia. So why do this? So, firstly, there's just a ton of basic skills that students learn from contributing to Wikipedia, from research, writing, online communication, collaboration with team members, that will all serve them in their academic and professional careers. But I think kind of on a more perhaps a little bit more of a loftier level here, students are in a really privileged position vis-a-vis knowledge. As students at universities, they have access to information that is often behind paywalls for the population at large. And they have faculty like Nanette and Trudy, who you'll hear from today, who can guide their students, in how to do good research and, what are good sources of information. So students are in an incredibly, they're just incredibly well positioned to make meaningful contributions to Wikipedia. And at the same time, while they get to improve Wikipedia, they also get to make a contribution that will outlive the course. They will have a long they'll have impact that goes far beyond the one course that they're taking. And lastly, they gain critical digital and media literacy skills in the process that hopefully lead them to becoming responsible digital citizens as well. Okay, I am now going to pass this along to Nanette and mute myself. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Helene. Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us. My name is Nanette Coleman, and I'm a PhD candidate in sociology at Berkeley. I study organizations and culture. My dissertation examines company risk and data breaches, and as you can have guessed by my oh so artful inclusion of my dissertation, I will be on the job market soon. I welcome your emails and calls with regards to that. I'm joined today by Ava Wu, a Berkeley alumna who is thinking about law school and government public service while working for a law firm. Together, we'll give you a bit of insight on how the Interdisciplinary Research Group on Privacy uses the Wikipedia assignment to get students excited about research and how students experience the assignment. My goal today is to get you excited about incorporating a Wikipedia assignment into your classroom or research group activities. The assignment is both accessible and moldable, with a learning curve that is more brisk walk in the hills than searching for oxygen on your way up Everest. Trust me, you can do this. And your students will thank you for it. And WikiEd makes the process of incorporating an assignment easy for instructors at any stage and immediately beneficial to students and society. Our portion of the presentation will focus on 2 ways to arrange the building blocks WikiEd provides. Number 1, our longstanding privacy literacy project, and number 2, our newish international privacy literacy project. Suspect there are a million permutations and combinations that are possible. Number 2, that I use to train research assistants and further my research. My colleague Trudy and from her class, Mark, will introduce yet another configuration in just a few minutes. But in the meantime, let's get started. We'll linger on this slide just a little bit longer. IRGP, the Interdisciplinary Research Group on Privacy, was founded in 2016 by myself, a BIPOC PhD student. I am a returning student on the other side after having worked in Washington a little bit. We are a virtual standalone, meaning we are not part of a class, discovery-oriented research and professional skills training program that focuses on privacy, cybersecurity, and surveillance literacy in 9 languages. The next slide offers a bit more about who's doing the work in our lab. So IRGP members are predominantly women and or people of color. Our lab members come from affinity groups and experiences, everything from first to multi, returning students like myself, international students, LGBTQIA students, disabled students, undocumented students, Division I athletes, and monolingual and multilingual students, just to name a few. We have exceptionally diverse majors: sociology, data science, molecular and cellular biology, like Ava, economics, computer science, and many more. Able to translate to and from English and 8 additional languages are students, and the full range of education levels. So I am the instructor of record, executive director of IRGP. I'm a PhD candidate with professional and academic majors, but our lab leadership is a mix of undergrads and postgrads, just like Ava, and grad students, and most of our researchers, research assistants, are undergraduates. The next 2 slides are about what we do and how long we've been at it. So we have 2 projects. We have been at the first for 7 years. That would be the Privacy Literacy Project that began in 2016. And the International Privacy Literacy Project started in 2019. Both projects reduce Wikipedia's content gap on privacy, cybersecurity, and surveillance topics, make academic knowledge more accessible, tackle misinformation, diversify who edits Wikipedia, and also promote information exchange across languages and between cultures. And to give you a sense of how long and which projects we've done at what point, this is something that's provided in the dashboard, which I know Trudy will be showing you more of later. But the first few years we offered just the PLP project, and then you see in 2019, 2020, we started offering 2 projects at the same time. All right, so the next slide will help you better understand how our approach to Wikipedia assignment is a bit different from others. So this is a side-by-side. As I mentioned, we are not based in a class. So this is a standard research project that's meant to help students understand the importance of research and get excited about research. So the PLP project addresses content gaps, as I mentioned. We bring academic knowledge from behind the firewall into the light, as Elaine mentioned. We do that by identifying gaps on Wikipedia with regards to privacy, cybersecurity, and surveillance topics. And our students create original pages or edit pages on those topics. We try to have all of our students work on what we call privacy plus topics. So the plus is something of their interest, the privacy being the foundation of everything we work on in the lab. So that was the foundation of what led to our second project, which is a little bit newer, the international project, or IPLP, International Privacy Literacy Project, where we took those articles that we'd been creating and editing over the years and started to translate those into other languages. So it began with Mandarin, but it's exploded into quite a few other languages, including ones that I had never heard of before, Telugu being one of those, which is a language that is done in India. But we address content gaps about privacy in other language Wikipedias and also in US and UK based Wikipedia. So we not only translate from English into foreign languages, we also translate back. We also translate other languages' privacy pages into English. And we've also worked in both projects to create language-specific or focus area-specific tools, which our students use and which we hope to make more available to other Wikipedia projects, including an annotation database, a bibliography database, and different documents we've created to help our students understand the different cultures and contexts that exist in other Wikipedias. The next slide will give you a sense of our workflow across the semester. I promise I won't linger on this because I think the most important and exciting part is for Ava to talk a little bit about her experience, how things sort of unfold over the semester. So much like when you're teaching a course, we're trying to get students into the classroom. I don't know how many of you have taught that class where you have to get over 10 or 15 in order to field the class that semester, but we do that every semester because we offer independent study credit. So we're recruiting early on in the semester, targeted emails, connecting with campus research programs. We get a lot of people join us by word of mouth. This is definitely not just Berkeley based. We've had students overseas as well as at institutions all over the country, including my alma mater, University at Buffalo, which is the best university in the world. And U Chicago, Smith, students from all over the place join us. We have info sessions early on, and our RAs are compensated in 3 particular ways. If they're at Berkeley, 1 to 3 academic credits if they'd like them. Ava has actually never received credits from us. Mentoring or career coaching. One of my last positions was as a career coach at Harvard College. So I spend a lot of time looking at resumes and encouraging students to think about their futures. And I also, my advisor, Ann Swidler, recommended, when in doubt, feed and water your students. So I buy lots of boba and burritos and occasionally take students bowling. I'm a pretty good bowler, so that is humbling for them generally. Working, so we identify interests and assign topics and translations within our theme. Those are those privacy plus topics. The plus is what the student is interested in. They do WikiEd training modules. They create annotated bibliographies of peer-reviewed articles, again, bringing those academic articles from behind the firewall into the light. We have regular lab discussions virtually. We only meet once a month to do giant data entry projects together, but generally everything takes place over email. And students practice Wikipedia skills by improving 5+ articles. We call that Add 5, Edit 5 every week on our topic. And ongoing peer editing of their article drafts and translations. That's our working session. And then just like within a class, we wrap up, they repolish their work. They're editing each other's work quite a bit. They upload their final drafts into the Wikipedia main space, prepare a blog reflection, and then every student every semester also presents at our in-house symposium. So that's kind of how our semester tends to go. But I'm not going to drone on here. You don't want to hear about process. You want to hear about the execution and what it feels like to be a student in this. So what it's like to be a participant. I brought one of our students along, one of my favorite postgrads, Ava Wu. And she's going to tell you a little bit about what it was like doing this. And I know she's going to need that next slide for us, Todd, and I'll turn it over to Ava.
Thanks, Nanette. So how does the workflow that Nanette was talking about translate to what students experience? Well, it means that there's a lot of flexibility. So Nanette mentioned that we are fully remote, and that means that we are adjustable and we can adapt to accommodate students in various circumstances. If they're in a different time zone or a different university, that's fine. Me, for instance, I joined in the era of Zoom University. So fun fact, I have never actually properly met Nanette in person. Now, as new students, the relieving part of it is that we aren't expected to already know how to do everything. Yeah, sure, we kind of use Wikipedia when we're totally doing correct research on our papers, but there are plenty of training modules available on the dashboard, and we can be sponges taking up that new material. We're encouraged to be bold and make mistakes, and we take ownership of our work. So we are in charge of our research, our annotations, our translations, weekly memos, and reflections. Now, for those of us who do return, we can apply to join the leadership team and help run the project via peer mentoring and our buddy system. That helps us further our confidence and pride in what we do, and further just demystifies a bit about what happens behind the scenes of Wikipedia. And ultimately, the Wikipedia project supports students learning by teaching us transferable skills. Helene touched on this earlier. We learn how to compile a well-sourced bibliography and annotations. We learn how to edit our work and translate clearly. And we get plenty and plenty of practice drafting and redrafting. However, beyond academics, we also acquire a bunch of professional skills. We learn how to do collaborative and independent work. We are taught to be resourceful because we have plenty of problems that might crop up, and we need to find out where to find those solutions. We have to be detail-oriented and organized, especially if we're doing virtual work. We have to think critically about the sources and various other aspects of the articles, and get creative about where to find reliable sources. We learn to make mistakes confidently. We adapt to different situations that might pop up because this isn't isolated in the university. We are communicating with people who actually edit Wikipedia. Maybe they do it for plenty of hours and they want to do this full time. And lastly, we learn how to do public speaking. So, okay, that's a whole list of things, but what does that actually mean? Todd, could you please move to the next slide? So for me, that meant a really cool exercise on exploring language and culture. I worked on the International Privacy Literacy Project, or IPLP for short. As a bit of background, IPLP started as a translation project in 2019. One lab member, Seth, kickstarted this project, translating articles our lab had written into Mandarin. Seth established the lab's process for translations, and throughout the year, bilingual lab members translated articles into more languages. Seth and Savannah, who ended up being our Wikipedian in residence, made a research poster on their work and presented at Wiki Education. Now, it's around this time that I attended an info session. It technically was in the same room as Nanette, but I attended the info session because the flexibility and adaptability of the project drew me in. That's the really cool thing about the Wikipedia project. It can be adapted to any interests, and in my case, that was language, research, and bioethics. So in the summer of 2020, I joined as a research affiliate, improving a previously translated article and figuring out how French Wikipedia works. Now, I'm somewhat of a language nerd, so figuring out how to translate technical jargon was already pretty interesting. But as I delved deeper into the topics and into Wikipedia, I was learning more about the cultural aspects. How do Francophone cultures view privacy, and what sources might be considered reliable in English Wikipedia, but not on French Wikipedia. In the fall of 2020, I joined the leadership team, and with those observations, the team began talking about how we could incorporate cultural literacy into the project. What sort of cultures would access our work? How can we thoughtfully exchange knowledge so we aren't doing academic imperialism, so to speak? We started translating in both directions, and students could propose articles to translate into English. As a returner, it was an interesting exercise in adaptability, resourcefulness, creativity, and even communicating complex ideas, such as the work that we do to strangers in my second language. So in the future, our plan is to grow our work into non-English Wikipedias through exploration and thoughtful interactions with Wikipedians in those languages. But as for me, this project helped give me guidance in what I want to do. Before joining the lab, I had considered doing law. I've kind of been on projects where we talked about genetic privacy, but being part of this project and seeing the the cultural aspect, the bioethics part, and the privacy, all in a sociological lens, it has made me more confident in my decision to pursue the legal field and given me a newfound respect for privacy and sociological lens and for the work that happens behind Wikipedia. I have friends who are teachers and they say, you know, oh, don't quote Wikipedia, but now I kind of argue with them about it. So overall, it's a really cool project where it can be tailored to the students' interests.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ava. You see why she's one of my favorites. I'll finish by sharing a bit about our impact. That's our next slide. Our little group, ranging from at times 3 people to, during the pandemic, 56, so that we could allow for a greater community for students spread out across the world who were interested in research skills. In the last 7 years, we've done the following. We are fast approaching 1 million words added to Wikipedia, 240 million views of the articles we've created or edited. According to Helene, we are number 3 among academic Wikipedia editing initiatives in the world. The largest, most diverse, most consistent, and longest running group of women and women of color editing Wikipedia. And because of that, we have been graced with a few awards, which we are very proud of. The American Association of Colleges and Universities K. Patricia Cross Future Leaders Award, a Berkeley Chancellor's Award for Public Service with a special citation for service to communities of color, and a Digital Pedagogy Trailblazer Award. I'll finish there and just let you know, let's go to the last slide, that I very much so stumbled into this. I think there was free pizza at this event, and that is why I went. And it has absolutely enhanced and just blown up my thoughts on pedagogy. And I have so much admiration and appreciation for Helene and the team over there. They've made my academic experience as a PhD student just incredible. So if you want to get in touch, our email, website, Twitter, and Facebook there, we hope to hear from you, and you can do this. Back to Todd, or maybe on to Trudy, not sure.
On to Trudy.
Okay. Thank you, Todd. So I would like to echo the others who have welcomed you here. We really are very enthusiastic about what it is that we are doing in the various programs. And I too would like to thank Helene and all the people she worked with for making this wonderful program available. And hopefully this session today will enthuse you. I think it really is a fabulous, fabulous program. So a little bit about what I and Mark, my student, will be talking about. The course that I taught and that Mark attended was Information Literacy in the Humanities and Arts at the University at Albany. This is a 1-credit, 7-week asynchronous online course with a mix of majors. Some of them are taking it because they need a credit to graduate. Others are taking it because it actually is required for their major. The University at Albany has a 2-tier information literacy requirement. And the first is in the first year, the higher one is in the major. And so the information literacy department at the university libraries was picking up some courses to teach information literacy to students in some majors. Most students wait and take this course in their senior year, and most don't expect to learn very much from it. After all, it's 1 credit and it's 7 weeks long. So Todd, if you could go to the next slide, please. The reason that I decided to use this course is I actually read a book about Wikipedia use in libraries, and there was mention of this program. And about 4 weeks before the semester began, several years ago, I just completely revamped the course. I love the idea of open pedagogy, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, but the framework for revising the practice of teaching to engage students in actively shaping their learning and contributing to public knowledge. And you've been hearing about that during this program. And there are the renewable assignments, and Helene talked about this. So students are generating material that's not just for their professor, but it's for others. It's for the commons, and it is going to be helpful to future students taking the course or perhaps learners around the world. And this is something that excites a lot of students. Next slide, please. So the benefits of renewable assignments. Students and instructor can work collaboratively to add resources that have real value to the world. And we have heard about that, and also the diversity of individuals who are contributing, and the numbers of people that are working in this program. But there are all sorts of renewable assignments, not just the Wikipedia one. I just find this one really exciting. Students are more committed when they know their work has a larger audience. I think that their creative potential and higher order thinking skills are engaged, and they may be able to use the work that they've done in an online portfolio that they can share with others. Next slide, please. So this course, because it's labeled an information literacy course, is different than a course perhaps in a discipline. And we'll hear about this some from Mark as well. But what this course does is mixes information literacy, meta literacy, and the student's major. You may not be familiar with meta literacy. I will talk a little bit more about it in the next slide. But for information literacy, and I know the librarians who are attending today will be familiar with the ACRL, Association of College and Research Libraries framework for information literacy for higher education. That has 6 frames in it, and we focus on 3 of them. Information has value and information creation as a process primarily, but also scholarship as conversation. From meta literacy, collective knowledge producer, reflective ethical contributor, and having students cognizant of the roles and the impact of the learning domains. Students' majors come into play in the Wikipedia articles that they work on. So the course is a mix of this information literacy, the meta literacy as sort of the conceptual background, and then the students put it all into practice by working on an article of their choice from their major. They have leeway in the assignment, so some may work on a particular portion of a Wikipedia article. Some may work on enhancing the digital images that are included. So they have some leeway, but I know Nanette mentioned the bibliography that they work on. They are all finding good sources that they are going to use to contribute to the work that they're doing. Next slide, please. So for meta literacy, and I do want to give a shout out to Tom Mackey, who co-developed meta literacy with me. He is here today, and he will be starting to use the WikiEDU program this fall, I believe. So the meta literacy model has a number of components to it, but given the sort of short length of the class, we focus primarily on the meta-literate learners' recognition of learning domains, which is the inner ring. So not just the cognitive and the behavioral, which are frequently focused on in education, but also the affective and the metacognitive, the reflective. Students also think about their learner roles, and you see those in the outside ring here. So they're certainly becoming producers of information. They are translating information from from scholarly journals to something that might be easier for others to understand. And Mark is going to talk more, I believe, about this. So what he's going to be talking about in connection with the course, some of it is straight out of the WikiEDU program, and part were supporting activities that I had added in Blackboard for the course. So if we could go to the next slide, Todd, and I will turn it over to you, Mark.
Sure. Hello, everyone. So my role here today is I just wanted to give you guys an idea of what this course looks like, essentially from a student's perspective, right? Because a lot of what Trudy gave was sort of like a broad strokes overview of like what the course looks like. And I guess what I wanted to give is like an in the trenches, sort of on the ground student's perspective, right? As the title of the slide sort of suggests, right? So in the beginning of the course, as a student, you're introduced to meta literacy and the ACRL framework, right? And essentially what that looks like is that you read relevant literature, and that's exactly the sorts of things that were mentioned on the previous slide, right? So the things from metaliteracy.org, right? The meta literate framework, right? The ACRL framework, the links that were provided before, excerpts from those things are provided to students, and you're asked to read them. And then those concepts, you're asked to sort of engage in discussions with classmates about them, to engage in a sort of reflective component, and you're asked intriguing questions about how you learn and process information, how you, in addition, you're also asked to watch a couple of videos. Particularly, I remember the concepts in the ACRL framework, like the notion of scholarship as conversation. And those videos are typically, if I recall correctly, they were made by staff members in our library, and they're made in a format that is very digestible and for students. And in addition, of course, it is a class after all, so you do have to take quizzes, and but of course they do sort of harmonize all of these concepts together. That sort of runs throughout the whole class, but it is primarily in the beginning, I suppose you could say. After that, after a few weeks of that, you're sort of eased into Wikipedia editing through the course dashboard, which we are going to get into in a moment. And so you start off very small, right? It sort of the course dashboard starts by sort of showing you just how to interact in Wikipedia, right? So it just shows you what a sandbox is, right? At the very beginning, right? Like what a talk page is, right? It's just very simple, like how to find a good source up to the Wikipedia standard, right? And then you slowly go step by step by step, and until you eventually get to selecting a topic. Now, what I love about selecting a topic in this course is that the whole purpose is to make it essentially open-ended, right? So that it allows the student to incorporate their own personal interests, or rather academic interests, into it, right? So for instance, I'm a philosophy major, or one of my majors is philosophy. So I picked an article, and you'll also be able to see that when we show the course dashboard in a moment. I picked an article that dealt with a philosophical concept that's called the brain in the vat, right? So I picked that Wikipedia article. And then of course you go through the steps that, we learned about a moment ago, which of course you find the relevant sources up to the Wikipedia standard, right? And then of course you write a draft, and eventually you do in fact make that final version live. And then finally at the end, you review somebody else's edits, and you have your own edits reviewed, right? And what's so key about all this, right, is that there's what I like to call this sort of a harmony, right, between the Wikipedia assignment, all the other tasks, meta literacy, and the ACRL framework, right? So everything that you've sort of been doing, right? So for instance, right, this whole thing, right, is scholarship as conversation, right, is a key component to the ACRL framework, right? And what you've been doing, right, in engaging in this process of scholarship, right? You've also been simultaneously engaging in a conversation, right? Whether it's through the talk page of Wikipedia, right? Or whether it's been engaging in the conversations through the discussion boards with your classmates, right? Everything sort of ties together through the various things that just through the way that the course is designed, and that's what I really loved about the course, and in the way that it's designed. So next slide, please, Todd. So this is the course dashboard. This is what it actually looks like. And I don't know, Trudy, I think you're Professor Jacobson. I'm not sure if you're there. I see that your camera's off. I feel like you could speak more competently about the actual course dashboard itself.
Sure, Mark, I'd be happy to. So what I did here was just excerpted Mark's information from the full dashboard. But in the dashboard, I could actually see all of the students, what topic they've picked, the topic that they're going to be reviewing, the peer review process. I can also see how many words they've added, the references, the number of references they've added, and if they've uploaded any images to it. The dashboard is a fabulous component of this WikiEDU program. It makes everything so easy for the instructor. So when it gets time to grade, I don't have to go to the Wikipedia article and try to figure out exactly what a student has contributed. It will show me the work that they've done. So it's just marvelous. Mark, did you want to add anything more about this slide?
Not particularly, no. I guess we could just progress to the next slide.
Okay, and here, what this is showing, again, Mark's brain in a vat topic. It also shows me sort of how many assignments they've gone through, if they've done the review process. Everything is integrated. There's a lot of training exercises, and I could see that, he did all of them, which didn't surprise me.
Right.
So Mark, I'll turn it back to you.
Yep, absolutely. So next slide, please. Okay, so I included this because I feel like when we're having these sorts of conversations, a lot of people, particularly students, like to ask, well, what's the sort of practical benefit, right? And Ava sort of touched on this sort of thing as well. Like what do I really gain from this, right? And that's what I wanted to sort of touch upon here, right? So one of my personal favorite benefits that I sort of derived from taking this course is what I touch upon in the first bullet point, right? Is the demystification of Wikipedia, right? If you ask me how Wikipedia works prior to taking this course, I probably would have just told you something to the effect of, well, random people just kind of edit things according to their whims of their own will, and that's it, right? But after taking this course, I realized that actually the process of editing on Wikipedia is vastly more complex than that, right? I'm sure I don't need to labor on that at any more length, right? But you also, in addition to that, you gain a lot more. You just learn how to navigate Wikipedia, right? You learn to gauge an article's quality level, right? Wikipedia also has this function, as many of you I'm sure know, where it actually tells you what the article's quality level is in some cases. For instance, there's featured articles and so on and so forth, but also you can just tell based on the quality of sources and so on and so forth. So you learn that sort of thing. And you also, of course, gain the ability to edit yourself, which is invaluable in itself, right? If you're reading an interesting article on something that is, of course, perhaps within your field of study, and you see something and you're like, oh, I'd like to edit that, or, add that to the article, or you see something that's just wrong, you actually gain the ability to do that, or at least you gain the confidence to do that. And so on the second point, there's a broad application of skills that are developed as participation occurred in each role. And essentially what I mean by that is that throughout this project, right, insofar as you engage in the role of a researcher, right, rather unsurprisingly, your research skills are developed, right? And insofar as you, engage in the role of a collaborator, right, your collaborative skills, right, are honed in, right? And those are skills that really you can take not only into other courses, but you can take far beyond into your career and so on. And I guess the third point, you could just say greater confidence in interacting with information online. This sort of ties into the really everything that we've been saying so far. When you see something online, you gain a greater ability to just discern, whether it's true, just the quality of the information really that you're reading, right? Because especially nowadays, right, there's so much disinformation and misinformation online, since so much of the course focuses on, discerning the quality of sources. you gain a greater ability to just say, well, no, that's not good information, quite frankly. And also, you know, since a lot of the course focuses on the various roles that people play as they interact with information, you also gain a better understanding of how others interact with information as well. And finally, it also just, to put it very simply, it advanced my knowledge in my field of interest, because I knew that I wanted to do something philosophically related, but the research that I had to do in order to make the Wikipedia edit that I wanted to do, just quite frankly, made me learn more about philosophy, which is something that I love. So, and that was great. And I think that could probably be said of a lot of students as well. So that's all.
So I'm just going to jump in for 1 second. So Mark, thank you very much. I'm just so pleased that you were able to attend and join us today. And just to talk just 1 more second about the meta literacy, it's a component of the course for 2 reasons. 1, to teach students about it, but secondly, to scaffold the work that students are doing. So thinking about themselves in the roles, for example, and I think it really helps them to sort of relate more to what it is that they're doing. Helene had put Tom's and my book in the chat, and I do have more information about the course in one of the chapters in there, as well as more information on open pedagogy if anybody is interested. So I'll turn it back to you, Todd.
Thanks, everyone. We wanted to open it up now to questions, and questions to which I'm sure our panelists and Helene will have answers. So feel free to unmute yourself and just jump in with a question, or add your questions to chat. And let me pause and ask Helene if there's anything that you saw in chat that you wanted to speak to first, and then we'll open it up to everybody.
I think I answered everything in the chat. It looks like, Nanette, you just got a question specific to your translation work.
Yes, thank you, Rachel. Rachel said, how did you handle quality control on article translations in languages you yourself do not speak? Great question. So the great thing about Wikipedia is there is a huge community that is very dedicated to the quality of everything that appears in there. So our students, as we've advanced, have been able to buddy up with others that speak the same language and are reviewing each other's work, but in a more rare language, at least for our purposes, like Telugu, where I absolutely have no exposure experience. We're definitely relying on the community for that. So we did a mix of assuring that the student had advanced enough understanding to be able to translate, and also honestly using Google Translate also. We also sometimes had our students check in language departments or with parents or grandparents. One of my favorite pieces of feedback I got from one of our students is, my grandma loved my page. So you don't have to feel like you're off on your own with this. The community does a fantastic job of I will say policing content and giving you feedback and supporting your work when work needs to be done.
If I may also add something too, trust me, the students are more terrified of translating than you would be of their quality. The students are more likely to be, oh, I kind of have this language skill, maybe I don't really feel great about it. And you can ask them how confident do they feel about it, what maybe are their previous experiences with the language, and that can help determine whether that project is a good fit for them. And on the subject of translations, one of the things I found really helpful also was going back to Wikipedia for help on technical translations. So for instance, we might have a name for spam phishing in English, but then the French Wikipedia page has been built by French Wikipedians, and they'll have their own term for it, and you can know that that's the term that they would actually use.
And just to follow that up a little bit, so we do support some translation assignments. I will say they're definitely in a minority. Most of the students that we support are working on English Wikipedia, and that's where our staff can help. We can't offer much assistance on other language Wikipedias, and it is important to note that and I think Nanette and Ava touched upon this, that every Wikipedia every language Wikipedia has its own sets of norms and policies. They often overlap, but sometimes they're different. So sometimes what's acceptable on French Wikipedia is not acceptable in English, and vice versa. And the different communities have different levels of activity and stuff like that.
Mark, I saw a question for you if you wanted to jump in.
Yes, I did indeed see it. And the way that the course is structured, I think, particularly because it was during a pandemic year. It was designed to be very hands-off, right? And it's meant to be very self-directed. I think so. I think it's sort of designed such that the modules do most of the legwork, right? For most of the students, and that was certainly the case for me. But of course, the professor and other students are there. If for one reason or another, you happen to be struggling, Professor Jacobson was always just an email away if I had a question about something, and that could be said for all the other students. So yeah, to answer the question, I think the modules, 90% of the work, but of course the professor and other students are always there. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I was just going to jump in on that briefly. There were only a few times that I needed to work with students, and those were usually problems where even Helene would get involved with them because they were somewhat extraordinary. But the training modules are fabulous.
I've noticed a couple of questions on technical elements of the work, which makes me think we've convinced some of you that you want to do this. So, so the answer to how do you get an article into Wikipedia is not magic, which is what I start with. It takes a little time, but it's not that complicated. Once you're in the portal, if you decide to sort of own and create an article, the system creates the page for you. It creates a sandbox, which is an area where you can sort of play before putting it in the main space. And the entire process that WikiEd is set up gives your student, and because I was learning to do that. I had never done this before. I had never clicked the edit button before. So I learned alongside them, and there are training wheels to get you to where you need to be.
I think Liz also had a question about some of her students' work has been taken down, and how do you kind of deal with that and anticipate that? So I just wanted to address that. It's Wikipedia. There's no guarantee that the work will stay up there. I mean, obviously we hope it does, but it's part of the Wikipedia editing process. Sometimes work is reverted by another editor, and that's an opportunity for students to engage with that editor to kind of figure out, why was the work taken down? Was it sourcing? Was it the language, et cetera, et cetera. So, there's no guarantee. And one thing that we stressed from the very beginning of the project is never, 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 ever grade the work based on what sticks on Wikipedia, because work can get removed, taken down for any number of reasons. But you'll always be able to access any work that's reverted. So you don't have to worry about you won't be able to find it. Nothing is ever lost on Wikipedia. And so, I mean, essentially, how do you get work to stick? You stick to the sourcing, you stick to topics that, where students can make, meaningful contributions. We always say sort of, you don't want too broad, you don't want too obscure. And it's so individual from topic to topic that it's difficult to give a single answer. But I think you just really want to vet. I think sourcing and article choice are what make the foundation for work sticking. It really happens at the very beginning of the process.
Todd asked me to jump in and answer a question from Jeffrey, and I think some of the answer is listed, but I'll I'll answer it live too. So the question is, it's not too hard to find Wikipedia articles that need development or editing, but does Wikipedia or WikiEd keep a master list of articles that need these things? A list one could refer students to if they need help finding an article to work on. So there's actually a tool within the portal, within the dashboard, where you can search for articles and then look and see the status. Is it a stub page? Is it a very advanced page? In our case, because we're so focused on a particular topic, you can find projects that categorize and also rate different articles, so you can figure out what you might want to work on. So so you can find a list of Black scientists from particular projects, or artwork, and if you want to work on that. Languages, I'm not sure. We've been doing a lot of that piecemeal, but hopefully between that and some of the other answers in the chat box, Jeff, that covers your question.
And yeah, and just to follow up on that, there's no master list. There's no master anything on Wikipedia, because Wikipedia is so, it's volunteer based. It's a very sort of broken down system, and it just depends on who's done what on Wikipedia. That said, Wikipedians love making lists, and there are tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of lists in all sorts of categories about topics that are in need of improvement, and we provide students with guidance on how to find those.
And one thing that I do with students selecting topics is that they submit 3 potential topics as well as 1 source for each one, and sort of talk about how they would be able to address the editing for each of those articles in Wikipedia, and I review them and give some guidance, so students don't go off sort of in the deep end, or someplace they're going to find for some article that they'll find that it's difficult to find sources.
So there are questions about being able to figure out which student is which. So when they sign up for their ID, I ask them to choose something kind of unique, because it's supposed to be anonymous, and honestly, in some of the countries where we translate, a student being identified given what they're writing about could be a problem. So you want to be mindful of that. I think someone mentioned using a student ID number. I might advise against that as a public part of their ID, because I think it's in most schools it's a unique identifier. But that could be useful behind the firewall, where you can only see things as an instructor.
Yeah, so as instructors, you can see students' real names as long as they actually enter them. So when they sign up on the dashboard and set up their Wikipedia account, they're supposed to input their name. So as long as they do that, and only you, the instructors, can see that, and us at Wiki Education as administrators can see those student real names. And then general Wikipedia policy is to make your username as anonymous as possible. Are there other questions we didn't get to?
This is a question that Trudy might want to field. Garrett asked about resources on open pedagogy. Any tips?
Yeah, so I've got about 4 file folders full of the sources on open pedagogy. So I just put a note in. If anybody would like to contact me, tjacobson@albany.edu, I'd be happy to share some. Some are more conceptual, some are more practical. And there is, not to sort of to promote it again, but the book does have a list of references that I found particularly helpful as well. And I'm happy to share these with people.
Thanks, Trudy. Well, I think in the minute that we have remaining, I want to thank you on behalf of our panelists in Ferris State and Wiki Education. Thank you all for being participants in the session. I also personally want to send a big thanks to Helene and Nanette and Ava and Trudy and Mark. I really appreciate you being a part of this. So thanks very much.